Hey everybody, welcome to OG Gaming. I'm Brent.
I'm Jason.
And I'm Isaac.
And today is our inaugural podcast, I guess, introducing OG Gaming. And we're going to talk about battle reports and podcasts for Marvel Crisis Protocol and Star Wars Legion from AMG, Atomic Mass Games. With that, we're going to introduce OG Gaming, and which we kind of already did, and what each of us bring to the table. So with that, I've got about 20 years of experience in miniature gaming. I've played BattleTech, I've played Star Wars Legion, I've played Armada, I've played X-Wing, I've played Marvel Crisis Protocol, I've played 40K. What else have I played? War Machine. So I've played a little bit of everything. It's kind of my experience with miniature gaming. I'll turn it over to Jason.
My name's Jason. I've been doing this for about 8 years. I started with X-Wing, went on to War Machine for just a little bit, then over to Legion for quite a bit. Then COVID hit and hit MCP up when these guys kind of drug me into MCP. I
don't think we really had to drag him.
Oh, you didn't really have to drag me. But you know what?
Wait a minute. I think it was the other way around.
I am the worst at the hobby part of this, of the three guys here. My stuff is gray. It's solid gray tone if my employee doesn't paint my stuff. Oh, yeah. I own the game store that we all play at. We got that going for us, I guess.
Yeah, so he didn't drag us.
I remember there being giveaways for the Crisis Protocol box set.
Yeah, but I guess it's grown. It's gotten a lot bigger. What do we got? 20 players now in our little community. Yeah. It's a very competitive scene. I have not been playing as long as Brent. However, I have perfected the art of salting Brent every time we play.
He's not the only one.
Oh, I think Brent salted you last time.
There was some salt thrown across the room.
Yeah. I've never seen you that way ever in my life.
So literally an arm comes across, picks up all his miniatures back into his box. He goes, "I'm going home."
Have you ever seen me pick up more than one miniature at a time?
No.
Just that once.
No.
Taking my toys and I'm going home. On that note, I'm the filthy casual of this group. My name is Isaac. I have about 7 years of experience. I also started with X-Wing, then went into War Machine for a couple of years. Then Star Wars Legion about the time the Mandalorian series came out, and then into Marvel Crisis Protocol when this shady owner of this game store was giving out free packs of core boxes.
Yeah, plastic crack dealer.
I didn't give out a free pack. I just discounted it just enough for you guys to get in.
Actually, I don't think I even got a free pack.
No, I think you paid full price.
I think I paid full price.
I was like, I think I discounted it for Brent. He assembled it and then.
I want to give a shout out to Geek City Games. As I said before, Jason and Josh are the owners of that. They do a great job promoting miniature gaming in our community, local community. So first and foremost, guys, make sure you're promoting your local game stores. They do a great job with promoting games and giving players a place to play and resources for gaming. So if you can, support those local game stores instead of the big box stores or online resources. So reach out to that. So with that, I think it's the players and the manufacturers and the local game stores that make miniature gaming what it is. So AMG does a great job with giving us great models and rule sets to play with. And they're really starting to do a great job with organized play. Ike and I went to Adepticon last year and we had a great experience with that. Maybe that can be another podcast that we share our experience there with. But they're doing a real good job with organized play. And we've attended a lot of local events at various game stores throughout the Midwest. So,
in addition to a couple at Geek City.
Yeah. So support your...
Oh, yeah. We did a couple leagues.
We've done a couple leagues.
Yeah. It's really got the player base to grow. And then we've got another store in town that has gotten that player base to grow up there and cross mingling. So
things about the MCP game itself, whether you're playing casually or at a tournament. Just some things that I think get overlooked sometimes, and just want to make sure that players are respectful of other players, especially in tournament play or even during casual play. It's all about giving our fellow competitors, the respect they deserve when we're playing against them. So, things that we're talking about are, simple things like rolling dice, right? I think it's real easy to, when you're attacking and stuff like that, you get caught up in the heat of it, and you roll dice, and I got a couple crits, and you roll your crits in and everything like that. And sometimes we might change our dice face or pick up dice or whatever. And just, I think it's very important to slow down and go step by step through the rules to make sure that people don't miss their opportunities to trigger certain things or have their chance to roll in effects.
Yeah, I think that, to piggyback on what Brett just said, is especially if you have new players, take your time. Roll your attack dice, roll your crits in, then have them roll their defense dice, roll their crits in, and do the whole sequence of events, basically in the step 2 of the attack sequence, just to get them familiar with it. Because if they go to a tournament, everything kind of needs to slow down at a tournament. Because in the store, everybody's going so fast. Like, we're rolling attack dice and defense dice at the same time because it's casual games. We're trying to get 3 or 4 games in at a night, just get this stuff knocked out. A tournament's a little bit slower pace. You need to see what they rolled and respond at the appropriate times and give them a chance for different triggers and stuff to happen. And if you didn't give them a chance for a trigger to happen, that's on you. They get to go back and add it after they saw your dice results. You don't get to just pick up your bad dice results and do it. You should have given them the chance to begin with. Like, tell them something. I think, at least.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say on that same note, especially when you are just starting, for example, a tournament game at a larger event, you will eventually get into a flow with the person you're playing against. But the first round or two could be a little bit of a, is that a long enough chance? Did you decide, I have targeted you. Would you like to do anything?
Right. And it's, it's different when you're playing casual, right? Like, I'll give my opponent time, or I might even remind them of something that their character might do. Like, if I know they do something, or maybe my opponent's forgetting something. I'm not definitely going to do that in a tournament. But, like, for instance, so I recently just started playing Midnight Suns, and I don't play Ghost Rider a ton, but he's got, the Wicked Judgment, where if your opponent rolls crits, and he's within, I think it's within 3 of Ghost Rider, you can pay a power.
2 power.
2 power, and for every crit they roll, they take a damage. Well, I was finding out at the tournament that, people were rolling dice and stuff, which is fine. That's what they're supposed to do. But then they would move their attack pool real quick, and I wouldn't have enough time to see necessarily, what was that, 2 crits that were in there? How many crits were in there? Mm-hmm. So it's like, just be respectful of that, because it's, it's a game and everybody wants to win, but at the end of the day, it's, just simple things like that I think people take for granted. Any other thoughts on just like dice in general?
Well, dice in general, just make sure, watch them roll their dice, have them watch you roll your dice, call out what you have. If you're playing on Tabletop Simulator or some other app like that, it puts it up on the top screen and it gives everybody a chance to kind of look at it. The dice just don't disappear like Brent's talking about. And if dice just disappear like that and you say, hey, I had 4 hits, and they never even got a chance to see it, well, technically I'm going to make you re-roll that if it's a tournament. If it's a casual play, I guess I don't care.
Right.
At all. Like, if we're just playing in the store, and Brent says he's got 4 hits on me, it's going to kill me, I'm going to lose the game. He's re-rolling that. But anybody else...
I have 8 hits against you. I don't have 4.
He never says 4.
Yeah.
I rolled 4 dice. I've got 8 hits. That's about
9.
what happens.
9 hits.
That's that. 9 hits.
On 4 dice.
Yeah, some ridiculous amount. But in a tournament, you got to give them time to look at it and get a chance. Tabletop Simulator does a good job of slowing that down. But when you're playing in real life, people are just grabbing stuff and taking it off. When you grab it and take it off, I guess it doesn't exist anymore.
So on that note, now I have a question for the two of you. So I've noticed about half of the players, and myself included, once I've rolled, I will kind of take my successes and slide them into a place so that they are separated. So if I explode my crits or I have a reroll or something, it's clearly happening on this side of the table, and what I did a second ago and is the state right now is on that side of the table. But I think there's been times where that also leaves an opportunity for a die to be manipulated.
Right.
What's your feelings on people who move them or leave them all in one?
So I think it's a good idea because your opponent has a good idea of how many overall hits there are just to keep track of.
Like at that moment.
At that moment, right? So I think that's a great idea. And I think it's a good idea in general, just to call out, after your initial roll, okay, so you're both in agreement. I have 5 hits, right? And then you just move those dice out. So I have 5 hits. And then you roll your crits or whatever additional dice in. And that's fine. I think that's a great idea because there's clarity there and you're both in agreement. And there's no gray area as far as, whether or not I have 5 or do I have 6 or what it is. So I think that's a great thing to do.
And don't roll your dice into a big pile of dice that you haven't rolled.
Yeah.
Because if you do that and go, oh, I've got a crit. No, you don't. You got whatever they decide that's the dice you roll because you can't keep track of it, let alone them.
And to be fair, most people are pretty fair about things.
Yeah.
It just adds clarity,
Yeah.
right? And this would be more in a tournament setting, really.
Yeah.
But I think that's a great thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a player who likes to put conditions on my characters on the board. I know they're supposed to go on the card. I think by the rule set, they're supposed to go on the card. Me personally, I like to put them on the character, and I usually talk to my opponent just to clarify during a tournament, so they're okay with that. And that's more for me to remember to, I have a bleed, so I need to remember to give them a damage, or they have a poison, they have 1 less power during the power-up phase or whatever.
When you say put them on the character, you mean put them
On the board. Yep, I put them on the board versus the card. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I much prefer in a tournament setting that all the stuff goes out next to the character. I do not like it going on the card. It seems like the tokens get pushed all around on the card. Can't really tell. People miss their triggers a lot, and you're like, did you take that? Did you do that? And when it's out on the board, don't forget you have a bleed. Don't forget you have an incinerate. Don't forget you have hex. Did you do that? When it's on their card, sometimes I don't think necessarily they're intentionally not doing that stuff and forgetting, but maybe they don't see it as well. So.
I was going to say, usually by that point, you got that card fully memorized and you almost never look at it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, right? Yeah,
So,
you play a list enough, you play a character enough, you're never looking at that card. Or very rarely.
Very rarely.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on dice or dials versus tokens?
I do not like it.
I really prefer the tokens. And even if they're like aftermarket acrylic tokens, I really like the tokens over dice or dials.
And why is that?
I find both dice and dials hard to read from a distance.
Right.
But at a glance, I can look over there and see, there's a stack of 4 wounds on that character.
I would agree with that, right? So what is it? Ghost Rider's Penance Stare, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was finding, again, I was playing Midnight Suns for the first time, and I was trying to do Penance Stare, and there were several characters that had dice for power and wounds, and so I was trying to figure out. I would always have to ask, which is fine, but it's just another thing that you have to, be conscious of when you're in a tournament. And I just did not like to have to constantly be doing that, asking my opponent, how many wounds is on this character? How much power is on this character? And I agree. I think just having just having the tokens on the character is so much easier to be able to find out what's going on.
Atomic Mass, there's a reason they didn't give us tiles. So why don't we just use the tokens? Stop trying to cheat the system out. You can carry the little tokens around with you. But yeah, I'm a token guy.
I could see dials if I ever saw a person with a dial where the number was like an inch tall.
So I did see. I played in one tournament where a player had a card holder that had slots, and you move the wound marker and the power marker between numbers, and it was easy to read. So you only had one wound token and you only had one power token, but you moved it between numbers, and the numbers were really easy to read, and that was fine because I could see real easily. But outside of that, was not a fan of any aftermarket like dial or anything like that.
A lot of tournaments are already banning small dials, small dice.
Yeah, good. You know, it's hard to see the difference between 4 pips and 6 pips.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Or even if they're a big 10-sided dice with a number on it, it's still kind of hard. Like, what are you at?
Yeah.
What's that dice for? Because you're not used to looking for that dice. You're used to looking for tokens, so you're like, what is that?
We have on here one of the things to talk about is terrain and measuring terrain horizontally.
So just be cautious. Think of this game as a 2-dimensional game. Ike, I think, explained this best when he was teaching me how to play. It's a 2-dimensional game. You're up on top of a building. Think of that as a big 2-dimensional square. Wherever the range ruler touches on the bottom, that's where it's at. If it overlaps or whatever, sometimes you got to go from the top down and just kind of like guesstimate. I hate that. But think of it as a 2-dimensional terrain. So if you're going right up to a building, you're at that building edge, and maybe it's got like a phone booth or something on it. That's purely cosmetic.
A size 1 mailbox, perhaps.
Maybe a size, just something on the side of the building that doesn't even go all the way down to the base or doesn't go all the way up to the top. That's blocking literally nothing. If your movement tool or your base can touch the bottom edge of that terrain, anything that overlaps the top edge of that terrain is within that range of the thing. Like, the game has been meant to measure horizontally. It doesn't measure horizontally from the middle of the piece of terrain. You don't look down on the top of the terrain to see if anything on the terrain's blocking line of sight. No, you literally, if it's touching the bottom part and the top part overhangs a range ruler, you're 100% within range, and you need to understand that this is a horizontal game, not all the little vertical things. Because when you're up on like a rooftop, I mean, it's a great example of cover and line of sight on a rooftop. Guys are dodging in between is what it's thematically supposed to be, of like a big air conditioning unit or some other weird
smokestack or scaffolding or whatever.
But they're still on top of the terrain, and there's no line of sight drawn to it because they say ignore anything you're on top of. Yeah. So they're making it simple for us. Stop overcomplicating it and thinking that this is something different. It's not. Every time I go to the forums like, nope, it's measured horizontally. Every rules lawyer out there can argue a little bit differently, but guess what? Every time the forums guys and AMG's got an awesome rules forums. God,
not familiar with it.
Yeah, I noticed.
Yeah, we know. But so you're bringing this up, Jason. This is out of a little bit of frustration at a tournament, right?
Yeah, it didn't make a difference in this, but this guy was absolutely adamant, and maybe he watches this, maybe he doesn't, but he was 100% wrong.
Yeah.
So I went back through the rules, 100% wrong, just because it has this overhanging thing. Guess what? The range ruler hung over a 1/4 inch of the top, and my base was touching the bottom, which means I was within 1. Thematically, it's done. It's over. There's no discussion. He's trying to measure from the middle, saying that I can't even touch the base of it. No, I'm not going underneath the terrain or anything. The terrain's a nice square rectangular piece. The top of it's a nice square rectangular piece, and there's just cosmetic things on the side. Ignore those because they're not there. So.
I think for the listeners, a thing to imagine would be like the newsstand, the size 3 newsstand that comes in the core box has that little overhang over the window where you could buy your potato chips and hot dogs and newspapers.
Yeah.
At least in our group, that little overhang doesn't mean anything.
It literally means
because
nothing.
the bottom of the train and the top of the train has the same shape.
Yep.
And we go off of that.
Those are the only two places you can measure at, so why would you measure? You're not measuring from the middle. If you're looking down at it, you don't look down. When you look down, there's nothing to see. It's just, does it overhang?
Yeah.
And would the overhang hit the bottom?
Yeah.
Because you can't go underneath a piece of terrain. You can only go up to the edge of it.
Yep.
So, and it's a square piece of terrain. So,
Despite the fact that I keep trying to slide my miniatures under the truck, they do not work that way.
we will not let him. He gets so salty.
I was going to actually mention, since this was, the inaugural podcast or video or whatever we're calling this thing, and Jason was talking about his tournament and his terrain issue, that might have been the first grain of salt dropped on the table.
It definitely was.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was in my last game, though, so.
That was your last game?
That was my last game. First game, oh my gosh. So here comes, if you're playing a guys, have fun, be nice. Guy does Helios bombardment right against me. So here's another thing in a tournament. Be nice. He does his Helios bombardment, gets the wild, totally whiffs the roll, 18 dice, gets 5 hits. Felt so bad because I got 4 defensive saves on it. Somehow, I think I had 3 defensive saves on 4 dice. One of which was a crit that also rolled in, and then just reducing damage by 1. But Helios Bombardment, I knew the wild caused the character it was targeting a damage. I took the damage. I took the damage because I knew that's what happened, even though that guy didn't tell me to take the damage. He doesn't have to tell me that it's happening, and if you know it's happening and you don't take it, that's just bad play in my opinion.
So I would say this in, conjunction with what you're saying. So we are close friends and we give each other a lot of crap when we play, and sometimes we get salty when dice don't go our way.
Sometimes.
And we may want to feel like flipping the table and whatever. But in all honesty, when you're playing casually against other people and when you're in a tournament, be gracious. Be gracious if you're winning. Be gracious if you lose. Honestly, if somebody beats you and it was their day and they win, don't steal from their victory. Don't make them feel bad for crushing you, unless it's Jason Clark.
That's
and then
right. That's
make him feel an inch tall.
Oh, yeah, definitely go after me.
No, but in all seriousness,
No,
if
terrain issue,
Yeah.
100%
Right.
not going to win that game.
Yeah.
Right?
yeah,
I lost the game.
I'm just saying.
Early on, but it was a stupid rules thing that this guy was going completely nuts about.
Yeah,
That he's just wrong about.
be great. Be gracious and humble in defeat and in victory.
Would not have changed the outcome of the game.
So I have I think an example. So I really like playing against Michael in our meta,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I don't even remember what we were playing with the situation was. That he had something like 6 attack dice and ended up with 11 hits.
That sounds like a Jason roll.
Yeah, it does. But when he rolled it and he saw how many crits he had, and then knowing that he also had 2 rerolls, in the background, right? Or it might have been he might have had Doctor
Oh
Strange.
my
I don't remember
gosh,
exactly
it was
how it
just
happened, but it was he was just like, Isaac, I'm barely ahead of you in this game, and I am so sorry, And he destroyed me. That was.
Yeah. But
that
we've
was
all
it.
had those games,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
exactly.
it is a dice game,
Yeah.
and it's an offensive dice game, right? It's not a
is. Oh,
defensive.
it's so skewed.
It's not a defensive dice game.
Oh, it's
But there
definitely-
are days where it is a defensive dice game.
Yeah, it can happen.
It can happen.
Well, I literally lost a game to Brent just the other day because I forgot to use a superpower. Our games are getting so close, it comes down to
Who makes
One.
the mistake?
who makes the mistake. It's getting
Yeah.
pretty bad. So. So let's talk about some tactics that are probably a little bit more for the more advanced than the casual player here. You're going to need to know the different phases and different sequence of events.
And triggers.
In triggers. Let's start with the power phase. A lot of people screw up the power phase. On the power phase, you gain 1 power unless you have an effect that gives you additional power. Things like the Hulk, Asgardians, Hulkbuster, She-Hulk, Dormammu. Those things give you extra extra power. Infinity gems give you extra power. So they all happen. That is the first thing that happens. Then you're going to resolve player effects starting with the player with priority. So like Magneto has a player effect when he puts out the construct, and that would be a power gain. You can play tactics cards like All According to Plan, which is a Criminal Syndicate card. There's other cards that you can play during the power phase. I just can't think of all of them that come to mind, but this is your opportunity to... Nice. So what are you drinking?
It's a soda.
Yeah. So and then the player without priority plays theirs. Then you resolve crisis cards or other things that aren't player effects that happen during the power phase. So like Infinity Gems, which Infinity Gem gives you an extra power if you're contesting it. Cosmic Cubes. Each instance of a Cosmic Cube will give you 1 damage and 1 power. But it also, you could have Kingpin and trigger the damage reduction. And just know that if you reduce the damage to 0 on Cosmic Cubes, you get no power. So you can reduce that power if you want and get no power, but you can still stop that incoming damage on certain characters like Kingpin, Juggernaut. Is Juggernaut player effects? Or any effects? That's a good question.
I'd have to look at his.
It might be Juggernaut, might not be Juggernaut. I'm pretty sure it's not Juggernaut. But you got Crossbones and Kingpin are the 2 characters that come to mind. Ike's looking it up real quick. Then you're going to go to the activation phase. And in the activation phase, we're going to talk about attack sequence. So I can pull up the attack sequence.
We can pull up the attack sequence.
And most people do this, and I think I'm just as guilty as everybody else. I kind of do this out of order, and everybody just kind of does this out of order, and it's accepted. Where we measure for distance and then declare an attack. You choose an attack. So you have to be able to pay for the attack to choose that attack. Then you declare your target. So let's say Jason's going to attack Ike. Now I go and make sure it's in line of sight. Then I measure to make sure I can do that attack because that attack has range. If I can have range, I have line of sight, and I can do that attack, we're going to move on. So then we're going to resolve effects that happen when the attack is targeted. So a lot of effects happen when the attack's targeted. Good example would be like Doctor Strange's. You can pay 2 power to add 2 dice if somebody's within 3. Magneto's, if you're targeted by an attack, you can use your Mystic defense instead of your regular defense if you've got 2 power to spend.
There's a couple of characters that have a roll 5 dice instead of 3.
Martial Prowess, off Gamora, and one of the new characters.
Yeah, one of the new ones.
Yeah, one of the new characters. So that's all things that you can do.
Proxima Midnight has it.
So obviously, starting with the attacker, you do things that happen after the target of the attack, and then you move to the defender, and then you move on to pay the cost of that attack. So if the attack has a cost, let's say 6 power, something awesome is going to happen, you pay the cost. Then you create the dice pool corresponding to that attack. So there's a lot of things that just happen there. And people just kind of cluster those all together, and then they get confused on what's happening. So a great example is what I'll give you here is Penance Stare by Ghost Rider, because Brent likes to play Ghost Rider a lot. Ghost Rider would choose that attack, and he would measure distance, make sure he has the distance, and then the target is, let's say the target's in range, it's in line of sight. Let's say the target's Hulkbuster, right? And the Hulkbuster has 2 power on him. Hulkbuster then pays 1 power because he was targeted by an attack to reduce damage by that attack by 1, which is one of Hulkbuster's if you were targeted.
Yep.
Okay? Now, you pay the cost. Brent would pay the cost for Ghost Rider to do this attack. Now he's going to create that attack pool. Well, that attack pool measures how much power is now on Hulkbuster, not how much was on Hulkbuster before he declared that attack. So now Hulkbuster only has 1 power. Penance Stare is only going to get 1 extra dice. And then he's going to roll that many dice. And he's going to apply effects that add or remove a dice. Like hammers would add a dice. Let's say he's got 1 hammer, so he's going to add a dice for that. And then just remember that a dice pool can never be reduced beyond 1. So got in an argument one day with people because I was right and they were wrong. No, I was absolutely wrong and they were right. I wanted to reduce their attack dice to 0 or something. And then they create a defense pool. So you look at all your effects that create a defense pool, any effects that would add dice to your defense pool or take dice away. Then you roll attack dice. This is what we were talking about earlier. So the attacker's going to roll their attack dice. Then the defender's going to roll their defense dice. And then they're going to roll their crits if they had any in. Okay? And then you get the chance to modify your own dice. Starting with the attacker, they get to re-roll or do any dice modifications. Like Gamora has an ability where she's got any wilds, she can change them to hits, other dice to hits. She can even choose the dice that had a wild to change to a hit, by the way, just in case you're going up against a MODOK or somebody that has some weird power that changes your dice later. But she does that first. So she modifies her dice, then the defender modifies their dice, does their rerolls or anything that can modify their dice, aka cover, anything like that. So anything that has the modified step, cover allows them to modify. Then the attacker gets to modify the defender's dice. So let's say they have Pierce. So they go and modify one of the results now back to a blank. And then the defender gets to modify the attacker's dice, which, like MODOK, can turn all the wilds back into blanks. So, and then that is basically what you're comparing now. And those are the steps to it. And there's a lot of things that just happen there, and people breeze over it. And that's where I see the most arguments in my store, is people are like, no, I got to do this. You can't just do that. Or I get to do this. They just don't follow all those steps. After you do that, what you can see is happening for damage. So let's say now Ike is taking 3 damage because we've compared our dice results. I've got 4 hits. He's got 1 defense now. He's going to take 3 damage. But before that happens, we resolve effects that happen before damage. So the attacker is going to resolve any of their effects that would happen before damage. Let's say it's got a wild before damage. You get to throw them. This is not part of the attack. This is an effect that happens during the attack. Let's say you throw them and you do 1 damage. Okay? Boom. That happens. Now the defender can resolve effects that happen before damage. And then you look at apply effects of crisis cards that would happen if there's something that happened before damage on a crisis card, which I don't think there's anything out there yet.
No.
Then you apply the damage of the attack, if the character's even still alive, because you might have KO'd it before it happened. And then the attack is resolved, but then you go to resolve things that happen after the attack. And this is what makes Brent the most excited about this game.
Well, hang on. Before you go on to that one, there's one strange situation you can get into with that throw, especially if you're using a builder. We should maybe even talk about builders, gainers, and spenders. But if you throw somebody and they take a damage, and then you did enough damage that you would have killed them even without the throw, you'll typically end up getting 1 power less, I believe, right?
What?
Because they took one of their damage
Yeah.
from the throw,
Correct.
not from the damage from
Yep.
the attack.
You only get if, let's say you're doing a builder, you'd only get the power the damage from the attack dice
That made it through.
So let's say Ike had 5 health left, right? Or no, in this situation,
I think you could go with.
Three.
Go with three
yeah,
health left.
He had 3 health left. I threw him into a wall. He takes 1 damage.
I have 2 left.
Yep. And I'm doing 3 hits, so he only takes 2 damage. I
takes
only
2.
get 2 power.
He only gains 2 power.
So that happens a lot too, where
That
they're
does.
like, I got all the power. Nope, that's not what happened. But anyway, resolve effects after the attack. Anything that says after the attack happens now. So crisis cards, the attacker's effects happen, then the defenders, and then crisis cards happen. So if the attacker has a tactics card that's after an attack, they all happen now. Then the defenders. Then we go on to crisis card effects. So it's just a lot of things that are happening, and they think it's all at once. Brent's favorite thing is 14A, basically, where rapid fire happens. So this is huge, especially with Daredevil out there right now. Shadowlands Daredevil. So rapid fire happens. And it happens after the attack resolves, so the damage has gone through, blah, 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 you've resolved it. After this attack resolves, the damage goes through, and they get another attack. Guess what? That attack starts now before we move on to 14B, resolve defender's effects. Let's say you're attacking Dormammu, who has, after this attack is resolved, you can put judgment on and move this character back away small. Well, the rapid fire is going to go off again without the rapid fire effect, and he's going to do all those steps again with the attack on, let's say, Winter Soldier, and then he's going to have an opportunity to do the judgment, move it back small twice, resolving the second one first, and then the first attack second, if he's still alive. He might not even be alive at this point. Hopefully that's how you timed it. So rule 2 is kind of tricky. If this target is targeted, step of 2 before you pay the power cost, there's certain people that have things that are going to happen. There's a lot of people.
Well, there's a lot of characters.
There's a lot of characters, but there's a couple characters that have it's going to stop the attack. Like Quicksilver or Loki have got some kind of trickster abilities where they pay their cost, they move small, and then you recheck range. And if there's not within range and line of sight, the attack just ends, but then you get refunded an action.
Yeah.
So once you get refunded that action, you can do a different action, which includes attack again, but you would have to probably pick a different target. But there's also, like, Loki has a thing on his card also where it says before you roll dice. So it's not when you're targeted. It skips all the way to the part where you roll dice. So if he's attacking, it's got to be right before he rolls his attack dice. However, if he's defending, guess what? Attacker rolls their dice first. He gets to see the attack initial roll before they modify anything. See what's coming in before he pays the 2 power to count blanks and SSSs. So,
Are you talking about the I am a god?
I am a god, yeah.
He has to pay for that before he rolls his dice.
Before he rolls his dice, but he gets to see the attacker.
Before he rolls his
dice.
Right.
But it's not during the target step like most other people have to pay it when they're targeted. There's a lot of weird interactions that I don't think you need to know about until you play the game more.
Always keep in mind, you're going to make mistakes. Everybody does. I think we all still make mistakes, and we've been playing this game for quite a while. So, just understand that it's a game. We play this. We play War Dollies to have fun, and so just remember it's a game, and you're playing it to have fun. So don't get too crazy with it. But Jason.
And just understand that just because you haven't been told you can't do something, you need to know if you can or cannot. Not to think of it the other way, Brent.
I just do it until they tell you can't, and then claim ignorance.
Oh my God, so much ignorance.
I mean, it's been working for him.
It has until I'm like, no, I don't think that sounds right.
Black Bolt has 20 health on his front sides. What are you talking
It just occurred to me why you and I, talking to Jason here, because it looks like I'm waving my hand at Brent, but I'm talking to Jason, have been on the rules forums, and Brent hasn't. Because he's doing something jank, and the two of us are like, I don't know, that just doesn't seem correct.
What is my saying? I don't intentionally cheat.
Yeah, but just because you didn't read the rules doesn't mean you didn't cheat.
No, honestly, I'm not a cheater. But I think that's going to wrap up, for the most part, our first episode. It's just a good introduction to OG Gaming, and really looking forward to bringing you guys some quality battle reports in the future of both MCP and Legion, talking more about, obviously there's a lot going on in both those games with Mini Stravaganza and what AMG's doing for the game, and there's a lot going on right now, and we'll be bringing more with models and battle reports, and we'll get other folks on the podcasts, and